Alright, so today I'll be upgrading this Tamiya Churchill by giving it its clothing, or its suit, by giving it some netting and some things just to spice it up a little bit. And starting off, I want to take the tank apart a bit just to make it a bit more malleable and easier to work with. And take the tracks off for later on for the painting process. And wanted to clean up the turret a little bit. The barrel had a little line across it, but just need a light little sanding. And then I use some of this AK anti-slip putty. It's a really nice little, easy to work with. I just sort of applied it over all the parts that I felt like it should have with some extra texture. Because the turret had some texture on it, but it wasn't very easy to see. And I used it on the thicker front armor plates just to give it a wee bit of a look. Obviously, I didn't want to use too much off it because these were quite smooth in real life. They weren't obviously perfectly smooth, so we sort of work with it a bit and make the putty just have a little bit of unevenness across the surfaces. Just makes it look that wee bit better, just that wee bit more unique to my model at least. And sort of splotching it around, and also using the thicker part to cover up that little line that was still in the front armor plate. It sort of just helps cover it up a bit using it very thickly. But the putty is very easy to work with. It goes on anywhere and sticks straight to the plastic and hardens really quickly. It's a very nice little material to work with. I highly recommend that slip putty as a armor texture. It's better to me than the Tamiya the Tamiya gray putty. And I use my glove to stipple around it just to make the texture a little bit flatter, so there's not so much roughness, because they weren't rough. And then I used some of this green stuff putty to make some tarps. Green stuff putties are really fun material to work with. I always really enjoy doing it, so I use some baby powder and this very smooth little piece of sheet to smooth it out with. And once I made enough, I sort of got the material mixed together, and then I made this sort of flat sheet. I didn't want the sheets to be perfectly square because I was going to have them all ripped up, and so I sort of just made it as flat as I could and stretched them, as you will see coming up here in a second. But the material is very, very fun to work with, especially for making little tarps. I really do recommend getting some green stuff putty. You can see I'm stretching it, pulling it apart a bit, and it makes it even thinner. And then I cut it around so where the little viewports could be, and then tore it down the sides just to give it a little bit of a worn look. And I use a lot of this putty, but because it's so thin, I didn't even use that much of it. But I also filled up the stowage box in the back, which I want to put some like stowage, and I want to put some jerry cans in there and a wee rifle later on. I was thinking about filling it up with some of the bottles that came with the set. That's the little bonus part of the set. It comes with this farmer figure, and it comes with these little clear pieces that are just little bottles, and then even some like little lamps and stuff. It's really nice. So I wanted to put some stowage on the front plate right now. It's gonna cover some tarps. There's this little ridge that sticks out, so the tarps sit perfectly onto that, so you could have them mounted and hanging onto that. So now I want to start making some camouflage netting. And for my netting, I use some water mixed in this little tub with some PVA glue, and it makes it perfect for brush application. Don't even have an idea what I just said there now, but it goes on really well with brush application, and it sits really nicely to the model. Just sticks, and over time it will harden and it will stick to the model perfectly fine. And the paint job and all that will sort of help keep it together even more. I originally was dunking it in the water, which was a terrible idea. It made it squiggle up and become like this weird stringy line. It was better to apply it thinly in a thin strip across the center when it was applied to the surface on the table. And then for larger pieces, it was better to apply it lightly across and then put the glue on it when it was on the model. But the netting that I'm using is made out of I just bought some really cheap bandaging on Amazon, like really cheap, because you don't want one that's like overly thick or got too many layers. I just bought this cheap, strangly sort of bandage. Horrible reviews, but you know what? For what I needed, it was perfect. Maybe not for medical necessity, but for me, it was perfect for what I needed. But I got my sure use out of it, used a lot of it on the turret. And then I used my AK leaf cutter on some real leaves, sprinkled some leaves onto the tank just to sort of break up the camo to make it look a little different. I think it really brought in a little bit of character to it and made the netting look a bit more interesting. Especially once it gets all painted up, it'll look really nice on the model when it's all unified. Just make it look a bit more unique, the camouflage. And then I used some Tamiya masking tape, like really thin masking tape, and applied small strips onto the camouflage just to give it some extra look to the camo. I saw some pictures of these type of camouflages that would have like little strands going across the netting would be. I would imagine it's probably partially to do with like how they mount it onto the actual tank as some sort of support maybe. But it looks very nice once it's all together. And then I used some of these this Tamiya tape around the barrel just to add this little strandy pattern around it. It looks really, really cool. A big fan of that. And then I put a small bit of netting around the barrel connecting to where the turret would be. And then I used some like sewing string to wrap around it to tighten it around the end a bit. And then I used some more of the tape wrapped around. Again, I give it a really nice looking effect. And then I got some of these wee small plants and applied it around the camo, just to sort of give it some different textures. And then I applied a small amount of glue onto the netting and applied it across the model. There we go, you can see how nicely it applies. And then I decided to actually just apply it dryly and then put a thin strip of the glue across it while it was on the model to stop it from scrunching, and it seemed to work a lot better. I want this side to be very thick with the netting, and I sort of layered it up a good wee bit. And then I wanted to put a small netting on the front plate. Made sure the machine gun can still move though, you don't want that to be restricted too much. And then I applied the netting on the left side now. I wanted this one to be a bit more ripped, a bit rougher looking. But it came out very nice looking. And then a wee small bit of netting across this little like support beam or put around the engine deck. And a wee bit more, another wee plant on the front. And then this small bit of grassy plant I found. And then cutting out some more leaves to apply all over the different netting. Just to spice it up a little bit. And then I put some tarps inside the stowage crate. I kept trying to put the stowage crate together, but just did not want to work. I got it in the end, but I did add some more stuff into it just to make it a little bit better. And here, I got this really thin sort of wrapping paper and wetted it down, so I wanted to make some spacing. I have this small crate from a mini art set. It was a Ukrainian figure set, but I sort of just took the crate because I thought it was quite a nice wee crate. And filled it up with some jerry cans. I later on moved the crate back a little because I realized that the turret couldn't move and that didn't make much sense to me, so I ended up moving it back and changing up the way it looked a little bit. But in the later on video with the painting, you'll see the slight changes in the stowage layout. But it is an improvement on how it should look, and it makes a bit more sense. And then I laid out a little jerry can on the front plate. And then put 2 jerry cans and a rifle in the stowage crate. And then put some more netting in the back. And then I put the lid on now. This time I actually got it. There we go, perfect. And then I put this little bit of string on. Tape. And I eventually got it in its place. Come on. It's a very struggle. It was a real struggle. It was fighting me the whole way through. There we go. And you can see some finishing pictures. I think it came out pretty well. I'm quite proud of the way how it looks. I've never actually done a proper netting like this before. And I would say I'm quite proud of the job I've done. And I would definitely look forward to doing some more British tanks with this sort of camouflage. And I would really, really like to do a Achilles tank destroyer or something like that with this sort of netting, or maybe like a Cromwell. They are very, very neat looking vehicles. And yeah, you can see the stowage there. I had some extra stuff on, but I would eventually, I'm gonna put the crate in the far back, and there's a wee potato stack which I want to move somewhere else. I haven't really got that through together completely. And here you will be able to see a small sneak peek at a paint job. I hope you look forward to the next video, and I'll see you then.